prelude, Emery and Eloise Carroll will be lighting our flaming chalice. Well done, Emery and Eloise. And we're going to begin by reading together the 7 purposes of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So turn in the hymnals, and it's about 2 pages before the first hymn, and we're going to read that first section together that begins, "We the member congregations." You with me?
In a minute.
This really isn't too hard a task for you to do. I want you to know. All right, we're going to read together, beginning, We the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. You did it. And these are the words of Viola Abbott. We are Unitarian Universalists. When we lift up our 7 principles, some of us think of them as a form of theology, but they are more important to our collective than that. They do not tell us what we should believe. They tell us how we should be.
They tell us how we should act in the larger world and with each other.
We are brought here today by the fact that Unitarian Universalism has fallen short of the image that was presented to the world and to many of those who embraced this religion.
But we are also brought here today by the truth that Unitarian Universalism has shifted course to move toward a place of wholeness, a place that perhaps never existed for us as a denomination.
It has been a long and sometimes unforgiving road to today. But we are here today because we are mindful of that past and because we have hope for the future.
We want the practice of this faith to be a fulfilling manifestation of its promise.
Open your hearts, seek new ways of understanding.
Come, let us worship together.
And we begin by singing. Our first hymn is "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning." It is number 153. And we join in the words of our unison affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. So be it. Good morning. Do it again. Good morning. There's still some life in this room. Welcome, everyone. Welcome if you're here for the first time. Welcome if you've been here forever. A particular good morning welcome to our guest preacher, Karlene Griffiths Sekou, and her son Lion, as well as to her mom and to her good friend Susan, and welcome to all the rest of you as well. If you are new here and want to stay in touch, there are blue connection cards in the pews. And as always, we welcome you, whatever your race, your class, your gender identity, your ability, your disability, your politics, your theology. Welcome whatever is working or not working in your life. It is good and it is important for us to be together in all our diversities. I bring you greetings from our partner congregation in Oberschwalve, Transylvania, where I was last week. I preached there a week ago Wednesday, and I was presented with a clock in Hungarian, and it has the words of the 1568 Edict of Religious Toleration. And I don't know how many of you read Hungarian, but let me tell you a little bit of what it says. It says, faith is a gift of God, and therefore it cannot be coerced. You cannot be forced into your religion. But I'll tell you the other thing it says in here is that the ministers may not be abused by their parishioners. That's my favorite part of the whole thing. They're both in here, so look for this clock. There are other things to be announced. I know that March 2nd at 7 o'clock there will be a cabaret, so mark your calendars for the cabaret. And let's see. Oh, yes. How's that national emergency going for you? I was going to find some smart aleck remark to make about that, but I couldn't think of anything worth mentioning. We do have count them, 4 new First Parish postcards in our Shameless Commerce division. And these are going to be available during coffee hour. They feature our new stained glass window. And so take a look for these, and it'll be honor system and 50 cents a postcard, and I'll put them on top of the piano during our community hour. Again, if you are new, we hope that you'll come for our community hour and stop by the welcome table so that you can learn a little bit more about us and we can learn a little bit more about you. And there is enough going on in this service that I think we're going to end the announcements right here. However, before the kids go on, I'm going to ask Karlene to come and stand with me. And Karlene is going to stand with me, and you're going to come over here. And this is Karlene, our guest today. And before kids go, I want you to know that Karlene is a scholar. She is a community organizer. She is a leader of the Black Lives Matter movement, especially in Boston. And she is becoming a minister as well. She is working toward affiliation in both the United Church of Christ as well as in the Unitarian Universalist Association. And I thought I would just ask Karlene if, when you were the age of some of these kids, was there anything going on in your life that put you on the path that you're on today, or were there adults in your life who were important mentors or guides to you? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good morning. I am so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. Now, when I was a little person, up until the age of 9, I was in Jamaica. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and I lived with my grandparents in a little town called Ocho Rios. And the most significant people in my life at that point was my grandmother, my grandfather, my immediate family, and that little town of people who, in order to survive, we had to help each other. So we did everything from plant our own foods and built roads together and cleaned the streets together. It was a community that literally had to love one another by living interconnected lives, being interdependent. But the single most important person to me at that point as well, and still, is my mother, who is here. She had left Jamaica as an immigrant, gone away as many do, to seek a better life, to work, and to send resources and money back so that we could survive. So my hero and heroine, and she knows this, because I tell the whole world, that I stand on the shoulders of my mother. And so my mother was the person that influenced me the most because she risked her life so that others, her parents, her siblings, and her children could have a better life. Thank you.
Hey. And that applause is from Mom, too, over here, you know? Yeah. Now, before kids go, we're going to hear from the choirs again. One more time. Janet, you're up.
While the three choirs are coming up, right? You guys all know who you are, right? The rest of you, hold on to your seats. Actually, the seats aren't free. You have to sing. So pay attention. The kids will guide you. And get ready.
Shalom, Havarim, Shalom.
And as kids and teachers go off to their classes, we're going to sing Spirit of Life. If you don't know the English, it's at number 123.
My name is Maria Green, and I'm part of the lay pastoral care team. At this point in our service, we invite you to come up and light a candle of joy or concern. I will be at the candle stand at the end of the service if you would like to light a candle in private. I like to light this last candle for all the unspoken joys and concerns in this congregation, but I also would like to light a candle of gratitude for this wonderful congregation.
Let this house be quiet. Let our minds be quiet. Let the quietness of the hills, the quietness of deep waters be in us also. So quiet that the noise of passing events and present anxieties, of random recollections and wandering thoughts is stilled. So quiet that the marvelous stillness is like music. So quiet that we feel the very being which is the life of us all. So quiet that we are renewed, we feel at one with all others, at home in a tabernacle of stillness. So quiet that we sense the ripples of this pool of quietness and healing pass through us and out to the farthest star. Let us spend a few moments in quiet. Amen. Annie and I will lead the responsive reading that is in your order of service, called Because Our Lives Depend on It. We envision a world where your life and safety is tied to mine, because otherwise our lives are in danger.
We envision a world where language is used for wholeness and liberation.
We envision a world where your liberation is linked to my liberation, because we are interconnected.
We envision a world where voting will be an empowering event.
Because justice depends on it. We envision a world where war and violence will be considered reprehensible, because dehumanizing others dehumanizes me.
We envision a world where creation, ingenuity, discomfort, and compassionate criticism will be welcomed.
Because we need these things to grow. We envision a world where all are valued, loved, and respected, because humanizing you humanizes me.
We envision a world where all living beings will have access to clean water, fresh food, shelter, beauty, love.
Because our bodies, heart, minds, and souls depend on it. We envision a world where fear will be recognized as an emotion and not as an authority, because our lives depend on it.
We envision a world where humans think ahead and consider impact on future generations,
because their lives depend on it. We envision a world where respect for the earth is as important as respect for oneself and one's community. We do these things because they matter, because our lives depend on it, because all of our lives depend on it. And I'm now going to ask Jerry Ross to come up and help in introducing our offering. And Karlene, I think you're going to come up too as a part of this.
So each month, our congregation shares our offering with a group of people, an organization that we believe is working to improve the lives of our fellow human beings. This month, the Social Responsibility Council is pleased to select Black Lives Matter Boston to receive our offering. Now, we aren't confused. We know this isn't the first of the month. But we are taking our March offering today because we have with us one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter Boston as our guest minister, Karlene Griffiths Sekou. So we thought we would take this opportunity to ask her to share with us a little more about what Black Lives Matter does and how they make a difference. Karlene?
As a core organizer, one of the core organizers for Black Lives Matter, we are a part of a global network within the movement for Black Lives, which I'm sure you all have heard about. We are an international global network that is committed to honoring the infinite dignity and worth of all Black lives, because historically Black lives have not mattered. And the way that manifests itself is through structural violence and inequities. So everything from what we call the new Jim Crow, which is the the prison industrial complex that hunts and imprisons disproportionately black and brown peoples. Historically, that is not rooted in a system of justice that accords due process to everyone, but targets black communities and therefore capturing cages black folk disproportionately. On a local level, we funnel into this network, but we do things like prison abolition. We advocate for economic equity, for educational equity and justice. We advocate for just basic inclusion and access to the necessities that every human being would want for our communities: access to jobs, access to a community that is safe from violence. And violence is not in ad hominem violence that happens in all communities disproportionately within a racial group, but violence that is bred out of structural inequity, right? These are the roots of violence. So our group does this work day in and day out. We get calls for people needing money to keep their lights on, to pay for housing, to access housing, to pay court costs. Many of our population day to day are suffering under the money bail system, and are housed and jailed. It's simply because they cannot post bail. And this is a system, again, that targets black communities. And the justice system, as we know if we choose to do the work and learn the history, is not just at all. And so Black Lives Matter exists not to evoke a mantra that says all lives matter. No, it exists because precisely that. Black lives have never mattered historically. As chattel, as folk who produced the wealth of on the backs of black folk, wealth of the United States was produced. Black lives have never mattered. And so that struggle is the struggle that we engage in and day out, to live into very beautiful words that we're hearing this morning, because our lives depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karlene, and I hope you'll be generous in your support of the good work of this congregation and of the work of Black Lives Matter. The offering will now gratefully be taken.
Well, you know, we have a Black Lives Matter banner up here, and it's been up for at least a couple of years, and it's been up so long that we hardly notice it anymore. And I was thinking today about various people who have spoken from this pulpit on subjects of dismantling white supremacy and promoting racial justice, and I think way back to Al Sharpton. I think back to Bree Newsom when she was here. Remember Bree Newsom took the Confederate flag down from the Capitol in South Carolina? Remember Debbie Irving waking up white? She's still doing that work. Mark Morrison Reed, the theologian Tandayaka, the Boston Globe columnist Derek Jackson. Probably I'm leaving some out. But this morning we welcome Karlene Griffiths Sekou, and my way of introducing you, Karlene, is to take you off the hook, because, you know, this really isn't about you. This is about work that this congregation has to do, and whatever any of these speakers, these acts, these preachers, whatever they do, the point of this is to inspire and motivate and goad and to help us to do the work that we need to do. So it's not about the preacher, it's about us, and I hope that we find new ways of deepening this engagement and deepening this commitment to this sacred work. Please welcome Karlene Griffiths Sekou.
Spirit of love and light, spirit of peace and joy, spirit of justice, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and meekness, come and be with us this morning. Come and rest within each soul, each creation in your divine beauty and power. Once again, good morning. I am thankful and honored to be here. Every time I am invited to stand before you, not in and of myself, but because at gathered communities we come together because we have a vision of something bigger than each of ourselves, but alone cannot be accomplished. Am I right? And so I am honored to be invited into your sacred space, your household, your beloved community, of which by extension and hopefully by intentionality, you can see me as a part of. To Pastor John and Pastor, I don't want to mess up your name, Annie. To my mother who's here, my beloved friend Susan, it's going on 25 years that we've journeyed together as sisters in Christ and in community. To my comrade and one whom is actually responsible for my presence here, Jerry Ross, We sat around many organizing tables, messing with this notion that we can build across bridges and we can be in struggle and we can learn to hear and see one another and learn what it means to be in solidarity and struggle for justice, and thereby affirming that your dignity and my dignity are one. And so, Jerry, I thank you. We actually, you caught the vision when we were in Japan together this summer at the World Conference for Nuclear Abolition, and remain committed to that. So I am going to refrain from being a long-winded Black preacher in the Black church tradition. You know, our sermons could go anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, and that's just getting started, right? I will spare you the integration of that into my particular tradition. I'd like to read from the text by Martin Luther King, Strength to Love, when he was giving his 1967 address to the anti-war group Clergy and Laity Concerned, after he had received the Nobel Prize, as a grounding text, one that is signifying some of the ground that I will cover and hopefully land in a solid place that ties our theme together of imagine, revolutionary, radical, and righteous love. When I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I'm speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another. For love is God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. And if love is the eternal religious principle King believed, then nonviolence is the external worldly counterpart to that. And he wrote, at the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. The nonviolent resistor would contend that in the struggle for human dignity, the oppressed people of the world must not succumb to the temptation of becoming bitter or indulging in hate campaigns. To retaliate in kind would do nothing but intensify the existence of hate in the universe. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chains of hate. This can only be done by projecting an ethic of love to the center of our lives. I will start off just by eschewing the large belief because of popular media depictions, corporate media depictions, as I am a child of a liberation struggle that stems lineages from the Revolutionary Maroons in Jamaica, which fought off the yoke and the backs of the British enslaver in the British Empire through the civil rights movement, and now to the movement for Black lives that does not expressly say that we are committed to nonviolence. That is one of the most frequent questions that I get, right? And so I would like to dispel the myth that it is a movement of violence. To the contrary, it is a movement that seeks to bring peace with justice to reign in the earth. And it works at a systemic level, of which I spoke a bit about before. Our methods are just that, building community, finding and accessing spaces where we can engage in discourse and where we can use nonviolent methods to disrupt violent systems of oppression. And we invoke the rights given to every other citizen within the United States of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is what they say. Equal protection under the law, right? Are y'all with me? And please, I am going to expect you to talk back to me. Just let me have that one thing from the Black tradition, and that's that call and response. I promise you I won't take too long because I'm going to move through this quickly, but it's okay to say amen. It's okay to clap your hands. It's okay to talk back, okay? All right, so that said, I am going to take us through a place of great sadness and really recognize that this moment that we're in history is a bit troubling. It isn't new, but it is troubling. Am I right? Yes. I must admit that my soul is troubled. It's not at ease in these United States of America. Every time I think it could not get worse, it gets worse, and we're in a state of emergency, but the wall is not the state of emergency. And I know you all recognize that, we recognize that, but we need some other folk to recognize that, right? So the shenanigans just this week alone in this nation, I know that many are not horrified, but it's embarrassing, quite frankly. And it does evoke a sense of righteous indignation, even rage, because it costs lives. I find myself harking back to the time that we are living in this moment by grasping for the ancient, the ancestral stones that have kept my people and other people, but I'm going to stand in my tradition, that have kept my people through the ages. A strong faith, reliance on community, and soul-stirring creativity. These people knew that despite the proliferation of evil and violence, one must be firmly rooted and grounded. And I ask you this morning, where are you found firmly rooted and grounded? What anchor holds you in these times? Our faithful admonished us that we were from the very beginning given an anchor, and so my ancestors said, be sure, be very sure that your anchor holds and grips a solid rock. And they sang in the tradition of the spirituals and in the faith of being excuse me, from in the tradition of that Palestinian Jewish person known as Jesus, because in that tradition they found a hope not just for their community, but in all of humanity. And don't get me wrong, I understand I'm in a UU church. And the thing I love about the UU tradition is that we have endeavored to enlarge ourselves, to try to grasp the universal imagination that honors all creation, all beings, all people, all faiths, right? And so we don't live based on our hurts and our wounds and our fears, but we live in the highest hope and imagination for our humanity to enlarge ourselves. So the people who say, Jesus, it's all right, isn't it? We understand not everybody will say Jesus. Not everybody will say Buddha or Muhammad. Not everybody will say Great Spirit. But the thing I love about my UU folk, my UU family, my peeps, as we say in the movement, is that we aspire and we struggle to live into this grand imagination called love and life and embrace. And so it is in that spirit that I stand before you invoking, excuse me, may I have some water, please? I had the flu back in December and lost my voice for about 6 weeks. And it's just coming back. And in the spirit of resistance, I'm saying, you are not leaving me now, not here. And so these ancestors held on to the promise of a better hope and a larger humanity to show us that we can actually, thank you, live into that. And in dire conditions, the tradition of Negro spirituals sung by Black folk during enslavement. Spirituals like let's say, didn't my Lord deliver Daniel? Didn't my Lord deliver Daniel from the lion's den? Didn't my Lord deliver Jonah from the belly of the whale and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace? Then why not every man, and I would add, why not every woman? Why not every sibling? Why not every tribe, every nation, every peoples, every tongue? Why? Their historical memory harkened back to those 3 Hebrew children who found themselves caught in the jaws of death and found divine goodness and love that came to their rescue. These people learned that God was a very present help in time of trouble. In the throes of Jim Crow, back then it was imminent death in slavery. But later I'm remembering Jim Crow, which brought an invisible wall, right? And terrorism against Black and brown people. Walls abounded that separated and dehumanized. This nation has an issue with walls. Am I right? It ain't nothing new. Walls based on race, walls based on income, walls based on sexual identity, walls based on body size, walls based on ability, walls based on religious tradition or no tradition. Walls. What is it It is futile. Is it futile or feudal? Come on, y'all are really doing some work this morning. It is both futile and futile, because my question was going to be, is it working for you? How is it working for us? It's not. I am inspired and encouraged by your courage to be a community of sanctuary, right? Resisting the urge to maintain existing historical walls and risking what it takes to honor the dignity of our dear sister and her family. But back to my sermon. I promise I'm going to be done soon. In the spirit of our rich musical tradition, in a similar time when our people could not understand and grasp and fathom the height of violence and evil, we had folk like Nina Simone, In 1964, she released a clear prophetic indictment of the domestic terrorism of Black folk. She said, "Alabama's gotten me so upset, Tennessee makes me lose my rest, and everybody knows about Mississippi." Thank you. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to just say, "Goddamn." Thank you, Pastor John. And everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. Both states had been major battlegrounds in the war for civil rights. And less than a year earlier, members of the KKK had bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church, one of several informal centers for the civil rights movement. 26 children. And as I watched your beautiful children singing and swaying and emitting the promise and the hopes and the dreams of their loved ones and their communities, I remembered those 26 children gathered in their community of love, very much like we are gathered here today. Can you imagine a blast coming through these sacred windows and walls and shattering their lives forever? Can your love connect to that place of not those people then, but our people now? This is the revolutionary, radical, and righteous love that we are called to live into today. Not their little children, not your little children, not my little child. These are our children. Simone goes on to sing, "Can't you see it? Can't you feel it? It's all in the air. I can't stand the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer." Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail. Have mercy on this land of mine. We're all gonna get it in due time. Picket lines, school boycotts, they try and say it's a communist plot when all I want is equality for my sister. Equality for my brother, my people, and me. And Marvin Gaye, in 1971, asked the question, what's going on? Very much like some of us today. What is going on? What in the entire hell is going on? And Donny Hathaway told us in 1973, someday we'll all be free. And I'll add here that what we say in the movement, that until Black lives are free, none of us are free. How many of y'all know that? Yes. We are as strong. We are as wide and deep and vast in our best humanity as those who are the least and the most vulnerable among us. And so I know many of you here know this. We don't say Black Lives Matter above and beyond anyone else's life. No, we are casting a different epistemic reality, a new vision for humanity, for a democracy that we believe we can actually attain. Because our forefathers, those who came before, who had the power to create hegemonic and systems and structures to limit and exclude and keep out, to build wall, did not get that memo. And we're casting a vision because we must say that in our generation, I believe we can get the memo. Black lives matter. It has not mattered. Black lives have never mattered. Right? White women lives mattered. So does Black women and indigenous women and queer women. Transgender, all our lives matter. And don't go around saying that, by the way. And yes, y'all are prepared to give the full context. Don't just drop, well, all lives matter. No, beloved, please, I will stand with you and I'll fight with you, but don't do that. Y'all get me? And this is the plight. Someday we'll all be free. Because white supremacy co-ops white humanity first in order to limit and co-opt the humanity of others. And so I appreciate your struggle. And so many dreamers and warriors in the Black struggle beckons my soul to rise up, beckons our soul to rise up and stand up for the rights of everyone. Bob Marley, my Jamaican ancestor, says, get up stand up for your rights. And logically, yes, we who are on the underbelly of violence and oppression must. But this is all of our struggle. Get up and stand up and be the best human being that we have the capacity to be. We can only do that together, right? I don't stand here alone. I stand with these and so many others who have seen in this moment, and those who have come before the many iterations of this violence, but also the courageous response of a righteous people that says we will not succumb to this moment. We will bequeath a better world to the next generation. When I listened to the joys and concerns, it reminded me of my time as a chaplain at Yale New Haven Hospital when I was a divinity school student. And I remember my first code blue, and I was shadowing a nurse. It was actually my first on 24-hour shift, and I was shadowing an elder, a staff chaplain. And we went into that code blue, and we suited up, and we walked right in as part of the medical team. And I watched these beloved people, the staff, the nurses, the medical team, work and work and work and work and work for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes, everything they had, every ounce of knowledge and training and goodwill and moral, ethical, righteous calling, effort, and love. It was a family member of a SWAT nurse whom they all worked with, whom they knew and whom they loved. All of us know that place of care and desperation and love and hope that we want to see and have the best outcomes for our loved ones. Race doesn't separate us in that regard, does it? Class doesn't separate us. What makes us forget? In that moment, I remembered my loved ones, and now that I'm a chaplain, I'm staff, I have to maintain a certain level of composure to hold space for the medical staff and the family of the woman who would then be declared deceased. But there was nothing in my humanity that I could put aside from feeling empathy and compassion and hold back the tears. Because I can imagine that if it were, as at times has been my own loved one, I would want that same humanity and compassion. It's easy to lose track of the best parts of us in this craziness that's swirling around, this insanity. Not a slight or diminution of mental illness, but this insanity around us. Yet, we have hope. We have hope to know that these systems of violence and death do not have the last words. The time for righteous, for revolutionary, radical, and righteous love is now. The time to stand up and resist is now. The time to fight is now. We live into this love when we stand with our immigrant family, brothers and sisters and children who have been separated from families, and no one cared enough to track and figure out where they're being sent. No one cared that they are given and sold to traffickers. That is not the humanity that we are called to. That does not reflect who we are, and we must pull together and declare that we resist and we say no. When we dismantle white supremacy, even though that's kind of scary to some because that's all we've known and that's what's given us access to privileges, it forces us to reimagine, to enlarge our humanity and figure out a better way of being, community, of living into the words that we say, the words that we sing, the creeds that we declare on Sunday mornings. It forces us to expand our humanity, and that might mean that we learn something from people who are different from us, from civilizations and societies who for millennia has honored the earth, have treated it as sacred, have honored the land and the water and the trees and our environment. Perhaps we must learn to intimately be in community and relationship with folk who believe in intergenerationality. That means our elders, those who have lived longer in time, as sacred stones, as libraries and archives, as our present systems of legacy and lineage and honor. And who, not because of what they can give, but what they have survived. And by virtue of being sacred and of infinite worth, and hold the generations to youth where there isn't just this divide between adults and young people and children, and we separate from one another, but there are communities for whom intergenerationality is significant. And I know that that perhaps is true in all family constellations, however they come about, but to make it a priority, that it then drives our policies. It then drives how we form communities, how we relate and integrate and include and think about space and community. Are y'all with me? Together, we must put our collective work, our collective love, and live into radical love. And I will close by telling you, as part of the BTC retreat within the UU, we went to Nogales a couple weeks ago. And we went to the border. And a part of our visit was to visit the first UU church in Amado, who had been in a time of discernment about a new name. And as we went and took a pilgrimage to the border, on the Nogales side, where we can look over and see the Mexico side and see the checkpoints. Many who had not seen checkpoints were really just curious, well, what is this? They had begun to put the barbed wires up. And I said, oh, I recognize that. That's a checkpoint. I have been to the West Bank. And although at that time there were no people in droves lined up and the officers sitting stationed and armed and scrutinizing and dehumanizing Palestinians as they tried to come through, there was no one at that border, but that looks familiar in my mind's eye. I remember having to go through the Kalandia checkpoint and watching the IDF intimidate and dehumanize young IDF soldiers, grown men, and turn some of them back who cannot have access to a livelihood that day, draw their weapons on young people, stop, frisk, and search just simply because they're Palestinians. And so this faithful community that exists on the border in the midst of walls discerned what in this moment is required of us. And I will never forget, as we dialogued and shared about their experiences of having folk who had survived coming through the desert and knocking on the doors of one woman who happens to be the assistant there. There was also another woman who's 83 years old who had lived somewhere up north, and she had gone south in her retirement years, and this was the situation. And she works with a group of people who have decided And in her own words, she said, "This is not the world I want to leave for my grandchildren. Young people should not have to give their lives fighting and struggling this battle. I have lived my life. They can have the rest of my life, but I am very clear that I am called to stand between the captors and people who are seeking life, people who are seeking freedom." She says, "I have no fear, but this is my duty and my responsibility." And in that moment, she connected to something that we believe in the Black Lives Matter. It is our duty to fight for freedom. And it is our duty to win. Because lest we think we cannot win, I would personally be in Jamaica on the beach sipping on something with a cute umbrella. We must hold on to hope that it may not be in our lifetime. I have ancestors. I come from a lineage of people in the face of impossibility had to believe that we could win. Harriet Tubman had to believe that we could win. And we may not see it in our lifetime, but we must love a righteous love enough to know that even if I don't win, even if I don't reap the rewards, our children will, our grandchildren will, our great-grandchildren will. But even if not in their lifetime, they know they come from a people. They have a legacy of people that stood up, that says we are revolutionary. We are the radical. We are the ones who stood for righteous love. You are the ones who are standing for righteous love. If you understand this, stand up with me. Stand up for righteous love. I declare that you are a great people, my people, your people. We are standing in an age that's demanding of us, that's calling us to revolutionary, radical, righteous love. And it means we risk something. It means we put our bodies on the line. We put something of value on the line to leave this legacy. And so in closing, the song that in my soul that bubbles up to the spirit to right now, not no wall, not no president, not no MAGA hat wearing person, beloved, God bless them, is gonna turn me around. And if you know this song, say it with me. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on fighting, keep on hiding in sanctuary, walking up to freedom's land.
Grab something during community hour and we'll carry on a conversation with Karlene upstairs overlooking the Bedford Town Common in the Bacon Room. And stay on your feet because we're singing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. It is number 1008 in the Teal hymnal.
And now may the spirit of peace, of light, of joy rest, rule, and abide in your hearts to strengthen you, to hold and enwrap you in eternal and righteous love. Go in peace and be blessed. Amen.